Good afternoon. I'm Elliot Black with the U.S. Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us to watch this important video update on the Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Protection Program. Before we jump into substance, I'd like to hit a few administrative matters. First and foremost, all three of our prior webinars are still available. They all contain important information that I believe will be helpful to you, although this presentation today provides some important updates on a few substantive matters. I do want to emphasize, each of the earlier webinars is less than an hour long, and we strongly recommend them for anyone who is considering submitting an application to the AMJP program. The webinars are all available at this link that's shown here, and the overall website remains available. There's a lot of resources that will be very helpful to you if indeed you're contemplating submitting an application. And again, strongly recommend that you look at those resources. The agenda today, there are 5 sections. First and foremost, I'll explain why DOT is reopening the application process for a third time. And I'll touch briefly on the status of applications already submitted. I'll also provide a very important update on the relationship between the AMJP and the Employee Retention Tax Credit, or ERTC program, and that's the core reason for this update. I'm also going to reiterate some critical points about the importance of active registration in the System for Award Management, which is a hard requirement. And then I'll provide some important reminders about the AMJP application process overall. So part 1, first and foremost, why did we reopen the application process? First and foremost, we've continued to receive questions about the relationship between the AMJP and the ERTC programs. And I want to highlight, we published a clarification on this back on July 8th. However, we now have even more up-to-date information to share on this subject, and it's vitally important that everybody be aware of this. That we'll come to in section 3. Before we get to that, what is the new application timeline? The application system reopened on Monday, November 8th, and the deadline is 5 weeks later, on Monday, December 13th at 7:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's 5 weeks later, and I must emphasize, if an application is received in the portal late for any reason, by even 5 seconds, let alone 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, it cannot be considered. It's vitally important to submit well in advance of that deadline. And then an important change in process. This time around, we are going to begin reviewing and processing applications immediately upon receipt. And therefore, we strongly recommend you submit your application as early as possible. Likewise, I want to reiterate, it's important to understand, we may contact you shortly after that submission with questions or requests for additional documentation, and it's critically important that somebody be available to respond in a swift and timely manner to those requests. Now, I want to be clear, the review process will still take some time, typically measured in weeks, but the earlier you submit, the earlier we'll be able to consider your application and potentially approve financial assistance. And again, after you've submitted the application, please, somebody has to be monitoring the email accounts that are associated with your Grant Solutions username for follow-up questions from DOT. And we'll do that using Grant Solutions Notes. That's the principal function within the Grant Solutions platform by which we will communicate any questions or requests for other time-sensitive information. There are a handful of key reminders to be aware of. First and foremost, I must emphasize, DOT can only accept applications that are submitted through the electronic application portal. No other means of submitting your application will be acceptable. And we strongly urge you, complete the application process at least 24 hours before the deadline and retain the confirmation. Any problems related to your telecommunication system, connectivity, system compatibility, or any other technical issue, that's going to be the sole responsibility of the applicant. We can't help with that. You must meet the deadline. And we simply will not be able to accept or consider an application that comes in late or incomplete or submitted through any other channels. Don't print it and mail it. Don't try to scan it and then email it. Those will not work. It must be done electronically through the prescribed process. Now, I'll touch briefly on the status of applications previously submitted. As many of you already know, we announced the first round of awards back on September 10th, and then because we had reopened the application portal for a second time, we just announced the second round of awards on Friday, November 5th of 2021. There are additional steps after we make those announcements. Most notably, each eligible recipient must sign a legal agreement with the Department of Transportation. The money doesn't just flow in automatically, but it's important to be aware of those subsequent steps. Now, some people have asked, do I need to resubmit my application? And the answer is not unless you were previously found ineligible or otherwise disqualified. If you were, then you may absolutely apply again. But first, we strongly recommend that you carefully examine the reasons that you were previously disqualified or found ineligible. For example, if one part of a company applied and we could not reach a favorable eligibility determination, then please consider whether a restructured application for the whole company or an entire division might meet the requirements instead. But please look closely at our explanation about why the company was deemed ineligible or why it was disqualified. Conversely, if it was simply disqualified due to a problem or a delay in the SAM registration, then please get those issues resolved before you reapply. Some people have asked, well, can I just resubmit my first application? And the answer is no. The reason is because each time we reopen the process, we've had to update question 6 and a handful of other issues, particularly related to the ERTC program, but there are other small and important updates. So anyone who submits an application for the December 13th deadline must use the updated application form available in Grant Solutions. You cannot just resubmit what you did before. You should be able to transfer the vast majority of the information over from one to the other, but you cannot just resubmit that first application. And then again, we've had people wonder why they're getting questions from DOT after the application. We highlighted this in our June 14th Federal Register notice, that the Department of Transportation may seek additional supporting documentation from any applicant at any time, either during the application review process or subsequently, and that's why it's so important that you or somebody from your company must be available to respond quickly if we have follow-up questions for you. Some people have asked if they can change their application after they've applied, and the answer is no, but you can submit a new application to replace that original application if you discover that you made a major mistake, a material error, omitted something. You can submit a new application, we'll cancel the original, and remove it from consideration. We've had questions about whether a round 1 applicant can apply for an additional award, and the answer is no. The law allows only a single AMJP award for any given business entity for a 6-month period. So no, you cannot apply for an additional award. Some people have asked, well, what if our circumstances have simply changed? And it is true that any business that receives an AMJP award must notify DOT of any change that affects your eligibility, your ability to fulfill your legal requirements, or the amount of money that you're entitled to be reimbursed for. But that change gets done through the ongoing monitoring and reporting process that's outlined in the AMJP financial assistance contract. And that's important to understand. You don't need to submit a new application just because of minor changes in your eligible employee group or the like. The updated situation is as follows. For any agreement awarded after October 1st of 2021, ERTC no longer represents a restriction of any kind in any calendar quarter, and that's a major change. The reason is because when Congress continued the ERTC program beyond June 30th, they actually did it through a separate legislative provision rather than by extending the original provision from the CARES Act. And that is the provision that is referenced in the AMJP statutory provision. Therefore, this provision no longer affects AMJP awards that are made after October 1st under any circumstances. Let me present this graphically. In round 1, it did matter. The original application deadline was July 13th, and our target to award was September 30th. What that meant was, by law, we could not provide an award if a company had received ERTC during the quarter ending June 30th of 2021. We were very clear then, a company could earn ERTCs either in the quarter before that or in subsequent quarters. And we emphasized, even if ERTCs were earned in the quarter ending June 30th, we could still provide an AMJP agreement as long as it happened sometime after October 1st. When we then reopened the process with a deadline of September 1st, we updated that and we explained that our target to award was December 31st, and therefore ERTCs could not have been earned in the quarter ending September 30th. Again, we were clear, ERTCs could be earned in the quarters prior or subsequent, and even if it was in a subsequent quarter, if the ERTCs were earned in the quarter ending September 30th, we could still provide an award as long as it was after January 1st of 2022. But this is no longer the case. And again, the reason is because we realized that when the ERTC program was extended, it was through a different statutory provision, and therefore there is no impediment. Section 4. I want to reiterate, this part is unchanged, the requirement for active registration in the System for Award Management. We emphasized this as early as April 14th of 2021 in our very first Federal Register notice and in the website that we published on that date. All applicants must be pre-registered in the System for Award Management. We emphasized this on the website, and we highlighted the fact that this takes time. It can take a period of time measured in weeks, and therefore, if you want to pursue, if you want to apply for AMJP, you must make this your first step. You must check to be sure that you have a current and active and accurate SAM registration before you submit an application for AMJP. Now, some people didn't believe us about this. They got online and they said, we'd set up a username. That was easy. We did it in 10 minutes. But that's not the same as registering the company in SAM. That requires a period of time measured in weeks to get it validated by the General Services Administration and the Internal Revenue Service. So you must make this your first step. We further reiterated it on our June 14th Federal Register notice when we highlighted the fact that the company must maintain an active SAM registration with current information. That includes current information on the ownership and any subsidiaries. This information is vitally important, so you must get this taken care of immediately. A few additional reminders. Please be sure that it is current and active. We had companies who sincerely believed that they had SAM registrations in place, and indeed they did, but they had lapsed many years ago. Please verify that all of the associated information is current, the business name, the ownership, the address, the contact information. And please be sure that the information between the application and the registration in SAM is consistent, especially the business name, the DUNS number, the taxpayer identification number, the employer identification number. All of those must match. And please be sure that the SAM registration reflects your current bank information, because any disbursements made under this program will be done electronically through a transfer to the bank account that is on record in the System for Award Management. Section 5, final section, some important reminders about the application process itself. First and foremost, I must emphasize, this is not a complete overview of the process. For a more complete overview of the process, please look at webinar number 2 from July 1st. That's still available online, and you must follow all of the instructions that are contained in the Federal Register notice and the application form. If you fail to follow those instructions or fail to meet the deadline, it will result in your application being disqualified, and we don't want that to happen. So what the following slides do is simply to highlight some key issues that we have seen arise previously. First and foremost, I want to remind everybody, the application process involves 3 federal agencies. First, I've already mentioned the General Services Administration. They operate the System for Award Management. This is a government-wide system. And again, you must have an active registration in SAM before you submit an application for the AMJP. If you have questions about your SAM registration, please call this phone number or go to this web address. Secondly, we then are working with grantsolutions.gov. That's a separate agency that operates the Grant Solutions platform that the AMJP is using, and many other agencies use it for their programs. You must register on this application system in order to apply for the AMJP. If you have any difficulties, please call the phone number that's shown here or email this address. and contact them with any technical or IT questions about actually submitting the application and the supporting documentation. We then are the Department of Transportation. We are the program office that is implementing the AMJP. If you have questions that you have not been able to resolve, or if they are program or policy related questions about substantive eligibility or requirements, please email the address shown here. Again, active SAM registration is the most time-sensitive part of the process. Please contact GSA right away to address any issues. And if you have any questions about the AMJP program before you begin the process, please look at the resources on the website and then email this address if you still have questions. Once you've actually begun your AMJP application in the Grant Solutions platform, if you have further questions, at that point, the fastest way to get them resolved is going to be to use the Grant Solutions Notes function. That way, your questions will come in connection with, in the context of, your actual application. Now, this is an absolutely critical reminder, and a lot of companies struggled with this, so we're highlighting it here. When you set up your access in Grant Solutions, it is vital that at least one person from the company request this role, the authorizing official or authorizing representative role. And the company must request this role in Grant Solutions for the individual who is legally authorized to make the required certifications and commitments. And if this doesn't happen, then no one is going to have the necessary rights to click the two critical buttons, verify submission and final submission. This is an absolutely critical reminder. You must do this. Likewise, we had a couple of companies that struggled. They uploaded their application, or thought they had, but they didn't actually upload the completed application. They may have uploaded an empty file or their Grant Solutions form. No, you have to upload the actual application itself and all of the supporting documents. Absolutely critical to make sure that that upload happens correctly. But even then, you're not done. As I mentioned previously, you must have this button that says verify submission. This must be clicked by the individual that has the appropriate roles. And if you don't see this button, then you must contact Grant Solutions, because it means that you're not set up correctly and your application process is not complete, even though you think you've uploaded the application. And even this is not the final step. The final step is final submission. Again, you have to click this button, and if you don't have it, if it doesn't show up, then you don't have the necessary rights, and you must contact Grant Solutions right away. And let me be clear, if you're trying to do this 10 minutes before the deadline, you're not going to make it. You have to take care of all of these administrative steps ahead of time. Make sure that somebody is set up with the appropriate roles and authorities in the Grant Solutions platform. It's absolutely critical. Likewise, in the Grant Solutions platform, there are three key indicators if an application has not yet been officially submitted. First and foremost, if the application number still says to be assigned or the receipt date still says not applicable, that means your application is not complete. And if the status still says work in progress, any one of those indicators are clear indications that this process is not complete. Conversely, if there is an application number and a receipt date and it says submitted for status, that's indication that yes, the application has been officially submitted. Then a couple of details in the application itself. This document, this form in question 8 is critically important. This is where you are defining the eligible employee group. And please note, there are two columns and you must fill in both columns. One is as of April 1st of 2020. The second is as of March 31st of 2021. And the numbers that get put in here must add up correctly. In this example, we're showing a total company with total US workforce of 100 with a maximum size EEG of 25. But the person filling in these numbers has filled in numbers that are far larger. That won't work. Same for the second column. The numbers on line K, line kilo, cannot be larger than the numbers on line B or Bravo. That's the maximum size of the EEG, and it's critically important to recognize that. Those numbers in line K must be less than or equal to the maximum size of the EEG that is allowed by law in line B. This example shows numbers that actually comport, so that the numbers on line K are equal to or less than the numbers on line B. Likewise, in question 9, it's vitally important the compensation cost that you provide here is the compensation cost for the employees that are included in the eligible employee group, not for the total company. And that figure on line H represents the maximum amount that you can request under this program on the next question. So it's critically important to get all of that accurate. Lastly, I want to highlight some important points about supporting documentation. Please be sure that it is clear and complete. For example, if your EEG contains 25 people, but you choose to submit a payroll report that shows 100 people, make sure that you highlight which of those positions are included in the EEG, and there's a few different ways to do that, which I'll show you. And if the documentation you're submitting is not an official document, such as an SEC filing, a tax return, an audited financial statement, or not system generated, it's crucial that you sign it and date it. And we've provided guidance with examples of this on our website. Please spend the time to look at those samples so that you know what we need to get from you. Now I'll show you an image here. If your internal records look like this for your people, that's great, and you need to retain those internal records. But what you actually submit to us needs to be redacted and annotated. This is what I mean by redacted. Hide the names, hide the employee numbers, hide their specific titles. We don't need that. We don't want that in the system because it is potentially public domain data. But we do need you to indicate which specific lines are included in your EEG calculations. Here's another way to do it. Again, signed and dated. Here's another way to do it. Still redacted, just highlighting which lines, which numbers, so that it's clear, so that we can make a quick and accurate determination about how much money we can provide to you. And again, it must be signed and dated. Handful of reminders. For a more complete overview of the AMJP program, please look at webinar number 1. We aired that back on May 26th. It's still available online. For a more complete overview of the application process, please look at webinar number 2 from July 1st. And for additional reminders about the application process, webinar number 3 from August 4th is also available online. Although again, today we've provided some important updates on that. And again, each of these webinars is available free of charge. Each is less than an hour, valuable time spent to be sure that you submit a clear and accurate AMJP application that we can act on quickly. Likewise, there's a lot of resources still available on our website that includes the original Federal Register notice, a list of 58 frequently asked questions that we published on June 17th, additional resources related to SAM registration, and the sample supporting documentation. The website is available here at this URL, www.transportation.gov/AMJP. There's a section on how to apply. We're actively updating this website, and you'll see again all of this information. All of the requirements are clearly outlined, including active SAM registration. This shows again where the Federal Register notice and frequently asked questions and sample supporting documentation can be found. And again, I'll reiterate it one last time, please, it's vitally important. If you're in the process and you don't see this button to verify submission, you must contact Grant Solutions. Likewise, if you don't have the button for final submission, you've got to contact Grant Solutions because your application is not complete. Again, all 3 agencies are working together on this. Please contact the appropriate agency for assistance with any issues you may be having. Thank you again for taking the time to review this with us today. We wish you every success now and into the future. And again, thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity to serve you. Thank you so much. Take care.